Hello, I'm Deb Calvert. Welcome to the People First Potential channel here on Bright Talk. We are going to cover a topic today that's it's kind of interesting for a few different reasons. Among them, emotional intelligence is something that everybody seems to want, but nobody wants to talk about. And there are a lot of mixed messages, confusions out there about emotional intelligence, a lot that's still emerging about what it is and how to get it. For example, I learned just 6 or 8 months ago when I was researching my new book that emotional intelligence is built by asking questions, at least in part. And I always thought the opposite was true. I thought people who had good emotional intelligence, they just naturally asked more questions and better questions. But uh, there's all sorts of things like that that are counterintuitive, and we ought to shed some light on them. But today, before we do any of that, we're going to talk first about coaching, because this is about coaching others so that they can develop emotional intelligence. And based on the few hundred people who have signed up in advance, we don't actually have very many coaches here in the mix. So I am going to spend a little time talking about coaching, what it is, why it matters, and why it is the perfect tool for helping others to build emotional intelligence. Now, we got to do a little setup before we do any of that. And we'll start here. For those who are new to Bright Talk, welcome. It's an easy platform. It's got lots of great benefits. For example, if you look right below the slide that you see on screen, notice that there is a tab called Attachments. And I do like to load you up on attachments and bonus resources. Today, you're going to get an infographic, and the new book has just come out, so you're going to get an autographed copy of that if you would like to, with a free masterclass, and so you can see how to do that. And there are links to other kinds of content. I hope that you'll take advantage of the slides, the PDF of slides from this presentation. And there's a way to get in touch with me. So as always, if you're not here live, or if we don't get to your question when you're here live, feel free. Just let me know and we'll get in touch. You've got my LinkedIn there in the attachments, but you're also welcome to just email me directly. That's on screen now. And those two websites, one is the main company website. We are celebrating almost 19 years in business at People First Productivity Solutions. Or you can go to People First Potential. That's our interactive leadership academy. And it's where you're going to find a whole lot of classes, in addition to what you see here on Bright Talk, a whole lot of classes and workshops that are very, very interactive. Many of them are free. There are over 60 options there. So I hope you'll take time to go visit that. And in the attachments tab, you have the quick and easy link, as well as the course catalog for what we've got at peoplefirstpotential.com, the Leadership Academy. About me, well, let's see. Probably the only things you really need to know for this presentation, I am a certified executive coach. I have coached a few hundred leaders over the years, and those are leaders at every level. And I'm also a researcher, so I try to bring those two things together. Anecdotally, the experiences that I have, the kinds of things that I'm seeing over and over again, without ever revealing anything confidential. And then, of course, the things that are evidence-based, so that you're not just getting Deb thinks, but whenever possible, I'm giving you full, complete evidence. And if you ever have a question about which is which, I failed to tell you what's just a Deb thinks, let me know, and I'll be glad to point you towards some other resources. All right, well, why coaching? Let's start broad. Coaching for any sort of development that you'd like to see in someone else is a really good strategy, so long as you do it the way that's really meant to be done. And I'll help you sort that out here too before we get done. Coaching has a really, really good return on investment. That's investment in the time spent. It's also investment in training people to be coaches or hiring outside coaches. Coaching is its own discipline. It's not the same as mentoring. Those two terms often get used interchangeably when they're not the same at all. And coaching isn't the same as managing. It's not the same as cheerleading or being supportive. Coaching has a very specific approach, And for those who are in management or HR, think of it this way: coaching is like wearing a different hat, engaging with people in a different way than you would when you're wearing the hats that are in the other parts of your role. So, the business case for coaching is that you get a lot greater return on your investment than you put into it. And that return is measured by increases in job satisfaction, increases in engagement and productivity and retention, increases in customer satisfaction and in organizational strength because you're retaining people and those folks are more productive. You're also going to see some pretty nice benefits when it comes to less rework, higher quality, i.e., less expenses, and more revenue coming in from those happier customers because when people are coached, they do a better job, they're more engaged, happier in their work, and they stay with you longer. I'm not making any of that up. That is all evidence based. It's akin to much of the research you've probably seen in some other presentations here about employee engagement. They do go hand in hand. Engaged employees quite often say that the number one reason they're so engaged is that they feel like someone's helping them to develop, hence the overlap with coaching. Now, let me just talk to you a little bit about the differences between managers and coaches. Before I do, I should clarify, you'll notice that I said coaching for development. I'm not really talking about coaching for performance. That's something else. That's one of the reasons why coaching gets misunderstood and people think of it as being purely a management function. Performance coaching, that's what happens typically when, oh, somebody's underperforming and you put them on a performance improvement plan. And then as a last ditch effort, you give them some extra training and some extra monitoring, and you call it coaching, but it has a negative connotation. And as soon as others see that coaching is the last thing that happens before you get terminated, then there's a negative perception about coaching. People won't see that kind of coaching as being about their development. They'll see that as punitive. So I want to unbundle these. I'm talking about, exclusively talking about coaching for development, coaching that helps people to grow, coaching that helps people to stretch their own potential, to become more self-determinant, and to be able to thrive in the work that they do. That's the kind of coaching that we're looking at. And this is true whether it's in the workplace and you're talking about coaching in a certain type of job function. This is true in executive coaching. It's true in life coaching. Wherever you're helping someone to expand and thrive and grow, that's the sort of thing that we're talking about in today's presentation. So, managers, very important work, right? Managers have to focus on the short term. Managers focus on getting today's work done today. And it's extremely important to any organization that we have people who are getting that work done in the short term through other people. But when you put on your coach hat, it's about the longer term. It's about not getting today's work done, but as you get today's work done, how are you developing skills for expanded capacity and competence and confidence in the work that you do? Ideally, managers would do both. They would manage work and coach people for long-term development. They would help people do the work of today and prepare to do the work of tomorrow because pretty much every job is changing. We're all experiencing new challenges because the world around us is changing and we have to adapt. So as you look at these two lists side by side, you might look at them this way. Am I wearing a manager hat today? Is my role in this encounter with this person to tell them what to do through authority to get the work done? Or am I more focused on helping people learn how to do more, different, better, so that they can do it on their own the next time? Am I focused on results, or do I have the opportunity within this situation to focus on someone else developing some new skills? Am I measuring performance? Am I measuring development? What am I aiming for? And that'll help you to decide, do I give the directions or do I promote some self-direction and build that that self-determination, that autonomy, so that people don't become over-reliant on me. Now, managers, important work, and it is absolutely necessary at times. Managers mostly tell. They assign the work, they tell people how to do it, they give the deadlines. But when in coaching mode, you'd be asking. You'd be asking questions. I'll give you lots of kinds of questions to ask as I describe coaching to you in more detail. You'd be asking so that people are setting their own goals, making their own decisions, deciding their own pathways forward. And managers, sometimes they have to roll up their sleeves and get right there on the front line helping out. But coaches don't do that. They know, in fact, that if they stay on the sidelines, they're more likely to see people spread their wings and do more on their own. Right time and place for each of these, but it is important to note those differences. Workplace coaches, well, they are able to do what you see on screen. They come to appreciate the importance of what you see here on screen. And you'll notice this is quite different from what you learn when you go to supervisory skills training. See, instead of telling, you're asking those questions to understand what is it that people already know? What is it that they're already capable of and already on top of? And you're promoting self-discovery that builds people's confidence in themselves. You might be helping them to come to grips with their own goals, identify their own goals, think about their own action plans. You wouldn't be handing it to them. You'd be asking those questions to extract it from them. You'd call out times, probably with a question, uh, when things don't quite match up. Hey, I just heard you say this, but now I hear you say that. Help me understand, because you're promoting self-awareness and you're teaching people the kinds of things they have to do to recognize what they're putting up in their own way. Really good coaches ask really good questions and they listen to the answers. And because it's about development as opposed to today's work, coaches focus on the future. How do you get where you're aiming to go? This is a lightning speed overview of coaching so that we can get to the emotional intelligence piece here in just a moment. What I'm showing you now comes from the work of Sir John Whitmore. It is a beautiful, simple framework for a coaching conversation. It's all questions. You start by asking someone about their goal. So, what is your goal for development? Specifically, what would you like to achieve within the next 3 months? Right? So, somehow they're setting a goal. And once they have a goal and you've asked some follow up questions to very clearly define that goal, step two in this nice little acronym GROW is that you're trying to understand what's in the way or potentially would be in the way. It's a reality check. So, this is your goal. What sorts of things might crop up that would keep you from reaching that goal? Why is it that you haven't achieved that goal? What's been standing in your way? In the past, when you've had a similar goal, what's prevented you from reaching it? You're just trying to get all of those things out on the table now so that they don't come up later as a reason why the goal wasn't attained. Let's talk about them up front. And when you have the obstacles, you ask questions. So the person being coached can think for themselves about the options they have should they encounter any of those obstacles. Well, if that happens, what are some alternatives you have? And if you do encounter that obstacle again, what strategies do you know of that have worked in the past that would help you get through that? What are some resources that you have? How can you prevent that? All the options. That way they're planful. They have the goal. They're committing to the goal because they're getting all of the stuff out of their own way. And once that's accomplished, then you talk about the W, what's next? Let's tell me about the action plan. What's your first step? What kind of accountabilities do you need? What help do you need? Where are you going to get it? When are you going to get it? Go. So they create the entire action plan. One of the biggest values that comes from having this kind of a conversation is that the level of commitment to the goal skyrockets. I can have you set a SMART goal and you'll be somewhat committed to it because you put it in writing and it's going to be on your annual appraisal. I can give you a goal and tell you what to go and do. and you'll be sort of committed to it because you don't want to find yourself in a performance dilemma. But if I ask you to set your own goals and we have this very rich conversation where you get committed to your goal, I don't have to do anything else. You are going to be on fire for your own goal, the one that you set yourself, and you'll barely need any managing. You'll be off to the races. Okay, now I say all of that to help frame up what do I even mean when I'm talking about coaching. Now let's do the same for emotional intelligence, and then we'll put the two pieces back together. Emotional intelligence is, here you go. You've got the PDF. I skipped the slide, but you've got the PDF. Here are some sample grow questions that you can take and use. I'll show you some that are tied to emotional intelligence in just a few moments. All right, so emotional intelligence. It is defined in a whole lot of different ways, depending on what school of thought or body of work you might be looking at. But I like this definition. It pulls together, in my opinion, the main pieces. Um, it, it's about your own ability. And ability is the right word here because not everybody has the same ability, the same capacity to be able to do this. So it's your own ability to be able to recognize your emotions when they're happening. I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm confused, your own emotions, and you can name them, you know what they are. And then to acknowledge them, not to ignore them, not to justify them, but to acknowledge you're having them and to understand them. Why am I feeling this way? Where did that come from? But it's not just in yourself, it's also in others. Oh, I can see this person is getting upset. I can see this person is getting confused. I can see this person is getting angry in this moment. And when I have that awareness and it's accurate and I'm pretty quick to be able to accurately identify those emotional situations in myself and others, well, then I can intentionally decide. It's not just emotion driven. I can intentionally manage how I respond, what I say, what I do, how I consider the relationship and what I want to accomplish. All those things are coming rapidly so that I'm able to be nimble and to be able to be productive, achieving what I want to. Now, why work on it in the workplace? Well, there are lots of benefits. Um, I think in some workplaces, we we give an absolute. Either you've got it or you don't. And if you don't, too bad. We're just going to go put you in a corner by yourself someplace and we'll just say, "Oh, that's just Deb. Stay out of her way." We never give people a chance to have awareness. We don't give them coaching or opportunities to develop emotional intelligence, which is, like most skills, something that most folks can do something about. But let's talk about leaders. One of the big benefits is that it is a must-have skill, at least in certain kinds of jobs. People who are in executive roles, people who others turn to and look to for leadership, they tend to have higher emotional intelligence than others. Sometimes people get promoted into those senior roles because of their functional and technical expertise, but then the emotional intelligence that's lacking comes back to haunt them. And I've seen it happen, sadly, to way too many very talented people because they never needed it before, because nobody was willing to coach them or even call out for them. This is a gap. They, well, they either have to leave the position or they have to do a whole lot of work with a coach like me to break the bad habits of the past and to be able to go back and repair relationships that have been harmed. Leaders set the tone in any organization. And if they lack emotional intelligence and you allow that to ride without being checked, well, it has some pretty far-reaching consequences. It can result in low employee engagement and high turnover across the entire organization. So it's pretty important. These are the kinds of things that I'd ask you to keep in mind. I took this from an organization called Key Step Media. I want to make sure and give proper attribution there. As I said, you'll see the pretty much the same thing in most schools of thought, bodies of work about emotional intelligence, but I just like the way this one is framed up for our purposes here on this slide. Please notice, when it comes to coaching of any kind, coaches do not need to have the expertise that they're coaching others to have. This is a very important point. I have coached CEOs and senior executives in fields that I have almost no understanding of. It's way over my head. I'm talking scientists and architects and attorneys and all sorts of other professions where I have zero education or experience, and I don't need it. What I need is to be able to be a good coach, to be able to extract, to help facilitate their own understanding so that they can set their goals, so that they can think about their obstacles, and so that they can create their own accountabilities. So if you're someone and you're saying, "Oh, well, I probably wouldn't be able to coach emotional intelligence because frankly, I'm not a very empathetic person. I'm really, really logical." Or I don't like conflict. I avoid conflict at every opportunity. So you're looking at this list and you're thinking, I probably shouldn't coach around emotional intelligence. Full stop. If you are able to be a coach, and if you know enough about emotional intelligence to administer an assessment and to help someone process it and then to ask questions about it, that's truly all you need. In fact, in a way, it's better when you don't have too much subject matter expertise because then you go into teaching mode or mentoring mode instead of staying in coaching mode. Now, I will say, having made that clarification, I will say, sure, if you're in the same organization, especially, and you're modeling one thing, but you are coaching someone to do the opposite, uh, that can be a little knock on your credibility. But it's got to be the really big outward sorts of things. Classic example, someone with poor emotional self control who has big outbursts, they're angry or emotional in some way, to then go and coach somebody else on that very same thing. That does create a bit of a confusion. And that's often why people bring in an outside coach because there isn't that sort of risk. There's no reputation. Emotional intelligence is a very sensitive topic. I said earlier that coaching is one of the best remedies to help someone develop it. And that's because for a manager or someone in HR to go to an employee or to an executive and to say, we need to talk about your emotional intelligence, that's pretty likely to cause a defensive response. I've gotten this far. I never needed it until now. What are you telling me? I need to have a personality transplant. You're just talking about style, not substance. You're looking for a reason to pick on me. You're just jealous. All kinds of things. I've heard them all. All sorts of things come out because this is a topic that's very, very personal. And if you're trying to tell somebody that they don't have good emotional intelligence, what they're hearing is, we don't like you, your personality is defective, you're not good enough, inherently something about you, your character. And those feelings, of course, drum up defensiveness and resentment. So then people hunker down to defend their personality. And if they have an emotional intelligence gap, that makes it especially difficult to process and productively use this kind of feedback. At the very same time, all those emotions they're experiencing, they're valid. You can empathize with their reaction and you can realize that it might seem hurtful to tell somebody that they need to develop emotional intelligence. And this is exactly why this conversation is so often avoided. What you're fearing is that the other person might somehow shut down because they won't know what to do with that feedback and they won't know how to react when it feels like a personal attack. Enter in coaching. Coaching promotes the self-discovery. You don't have to be the bearer of bad news. You can be the person who's here to help. And then the coach is going to be able to help them walk through it and get that self-discovery. Now, Coaches. One more important difference we haven't talked about yet. Qualified coaches, credentialed coaches, they know that it's all about being coach, not couch. Coaching with all the best of intentions often falls apart when people aren't trained to be coaches because they instead end up being more like therapists, or at least trying to be. They probably don't have the skills for that either, but they try to be diagnosing why things are the way they are, looking backwards instead of saying, okay, here's where we are. This is where you are. This is your starting point. Now let's talk about where you want to be and how to get there. Coaches focus forward. It's all about development. It's not about blame, shame, judgment, diagnostics from the past. That's all therapy. And if therapy is what's needed instead of coaching, qualified coaches can figure that out pretty quickly and point people in the right direction to a more appropriate resource. But when it comes to emotional intelligence, it is usually more often a matter of some coaching. Small steps help, affirming the awareness and the self-discovery and someone's openness to change. That's where you get momentum. That's where things really start to happen. Now, with emotional intelligence, I really think that it's a very good idea to start with an assessment. See, nobody has to say you have something defective in your personality, in your behavior. We can just assess it, and the assessment will produce those results and help someone to have that self-awareness right from the beginning. There are quite a few different models out there, quite a few different assessments. I'll just tell you about a few of them. Probably the very best known is ESCI. That's the Emotional and Social Competency Inventory. It can be done as a self-assessment or as a 360 to get feedback from others. It was developed by Daniel Goleman. Now, he's one of the foremost researchers about emotional intelligence. He has some great books that you could read. And they did that in partnership with Korn Ferry, the Hay Group, which you may know that name because they are so deeply involved in creating competencies for various job roles. So it's a very well-known one. It's got a little bit of a hefty price tag attached to it, but depending on who you're working with and what you're trying to accomplish, this can be a very comprehensive starting point. There's also Genos EI, that's GENOS. That's pretty widely used in workplaces. The full name is Genos Emotional Intelligence Inventory. And then there are some simpler models. I favor one called EISA. That stands for Emotional Intelligence Skills Assessment. I like that one because it's simple. I'll show it to you in just a moment. And then there are some out there that are based on competencies like the ones I showed you a few slides ago. The Profile of Emotional Competence, PEC, would be an example of that. And they have these competencies revealed by doing things like identifying what emotion is being displayed by the person in this photograph. So you're supposed to be able to read the body language and the facial expressions, and it gauges how accurate someone is in reading those kinds of cues. I should tell you, there are also some pretty good free tools that are very easy to access online. I'll tell you about three of them, and maybe you go take them for a test drive and decide if there'd be value in whatever your situation might be. One of them comes from the magazine Psychology Today, and if you just go look up Psychology Today Emotional Intelligence Assessment, you'll get it. It's www.psychologytoday.com, and then a whole bunch of backslashes that end with emotional intelligence test, but it'll come up in a Google search. There's also a good one from Mind Tools. Same thing. Oh, by the way, if you don't know the Mind Tools website, there's all kinds of really good stuff over there. So I recommend that for just about anything. But go to Mind Tools, do a Google search on Mind Tools plus emotional intelligence. It'll take you there. And then another one that I very much like is called Institute for Health and Human Potential. That's the name of the organization. And the organization's name is abbreviated IHHP, that's their website, ihhp.com. Same thing. In fact, right on their front page, they're going to tell you, get this free EQ quiz. So go and get that. I've tried a bunch of them. I've used different ones in coaching depending on the need and the situation. Um, because coaching focuses on self discovery, you don't necessarily need to be fully certified as an interpreter of some emotional intelligence report. There are those like that out there too. But if you're looking for simple and you're looking for something to use in coaching, it's actually better for the person that you're coaching to be able to make their own interpretations and have their own initial ideas. And then as a coach, you just keep asking questions to promote more and more self discovery. Now, as I said, I like this one, EISA. It's the one that I use most often. If you go to the Leadership Academy, peoplefirstpotential.com, I do have a little coaching package that I do. It's the assessment plus just a couple of coaching sessions to help anyone who just needs to get started. It can be that simple and easy. So what I'm showing you here are 5 dimensions that are revealed in this model: perceiving, managing, decision making, achieving, and influencing. I kind of like the word choices in this model. Some of the models that are out there, they have buckets or groupings of behaviors that some of the terminology just sounds really, really negative. So I like this because it's positive, but it's also, this one has a very much a business tone. It focuses on maximizing performance, and it shows the benefits of working on emotional intelligence right in the names of those 5 dimensions. And then in the explanations that go beyond that, there are some emotional as well as some social implications that are described. It's also a pretty quick, easy, simple test, so people won't feel like it's tricky. They won't feel like it's too hard. They won't feel like they have to overthink something. Um, so, you've got a lot that you could consider. But I would suggest whichever one you're using, consider starting with some sort of an assessment, even if it's a self assessment. What you're looking to do after the assessment is to build self awareness. You're going to build self awareness, you're going to facilitate self discovery, and the questions that you see on screen are the kinds of questions that help someone do that as they're looking at the report that comes out of their assessment. Now, since self awareness is one of the very core foundations of emotional intelligence, that might be a little slow going at first. It may take people a little while to warm up to these kinds of questions. Just expect that. Don't be alarmed by it. Stay with it. Avoid rushing. Be very careful not to lead the person that you're coaching, because this is an exercise in something they don't do that often. It's an exercise in reflection, in understanding one's own actions and choices, and in understanding the impact of those actions and choices on others. It also requires getting people to be comfortable with being honest with themselves and vulnerable enough to talk about some of those things that maybe they feel a little bit vulnerable about. So make the conversation safe, non-judging, and affirming, and be sure that the person you're coaching is drawing their own conclusions versus someone else doing that for them. I told you I'd come back to the GROW model and give you some questions, so I'll do it fairly quickly, but you'll take the PDF there and the attachments along with all the other bonus resources. Step 1 in the GROW coaching model is to get someone to set their own goal. So let's say you've given them the report and you've walked through the report using the kinds of questions on the previous screen, just for that general awareness and understanding. And now it's time to move into the GROW coaching model. These questions help them to begin setting a goal. Based on everything you saw in the report, what would you like to work on? And as you're working on that, what are you really aiming for? What does success look like? What kind of a time frame do you need? Why does this matter to you? Because, That's an important part of goal setting. If I'm doing it just to get out of this coaching call, I'm not going to have that level of commitment that we're looking for. On the previous screen, there were some questions like, give me examples of how this has played out in your career and what was the impact. And so you have primed the pump. And when you get to these goal setting questions, that's what's going to be foremost in their mind. Step 2 of the Grow coaching model is to think about the obstacles before they ever show up as in live time. Let's just talk about them up front, get them out on the table. This is a sort of a reality check. What challenges might you encounter? In the past, what's gotten in your way of doing this already? What kind of reservations do you have about seeing your goal through? You get it all out there on the table. That way it doesn't surface at the end when it was time for the goal to be met and somebody uses the same thing they would have told you here as the excuse for not doing it. We've got it out on the table, and now it's time to think about the options for those obstacles. Well, if you encounter that issue that you just described, what will you do? And if that happens, what are some resources you could access? Who else has ever been up against something like this, and what did they do? And what sort of things do you need to power through whatever that obstacle may be so that you can reach your goal? See, all these questions are about strengthening the commitment to the goal, about helping people feel more confident that no matter what comes up, they're going to reach that goal. And the Grow coaching model ends with the W. Here's the action planning. What's next? How do you get started? A good coach will start with, tell me what's the first step and when will you be doing that? And then what? And what are those metrics? And when are you checking in? And if you have to recalibrate, how will you do that so that you keep working on this plan to get back to your goal? And when would you like to meet and talk about this? Instead of telling, instead of managing, instead of saying, here's the goal, here's the times that we're going to check in, here's what I expect from you in a managerial form, a coach asks all these questions because then the answers have come from the person who's going to be doing the work. The answers come from the person who's going to ultimately fail or succeed. And if they've worked out a plan for themselves ahead of time, you dramatically increase that rate of success. Okay, we covered a lot of ground there. I know you may have some questions. Don't forget, you've got my email address. You've got my LinkedIn connection. You are welcome to get in touch with me anytime to ask any questions I haven't answered here already. And for those of you who are live, we could also do a last call for questions. I want to tell you something else that's right there in the attachments. I did just release a new book. It's called Discover Questions for Connections, Clarity, and Control. And as part of the research for that book, I talked with a lot of ICF credentialed coaches. I asked them to give me examples of questions that were working for them. And I put other research, my own and others' research, into questions, using questions for situations just like this. And it's my second book about questions. I've been researching questions for a long time. It is not super academic. It's a pretty easy read. It has curated questions from all kinds of people, including coaches, and it's a step-by-step guide for being able to create clarity and strengthen connections and reclaim control in any situation, including helping someone, maybe even yourself, with emotional intelligence. So if you want to read more about this subject and the tangents that naturally come out of this, in the attachments, take my offer there. It's for an autographed book and a free class. And that value would be around $200 if you bought those separately, but it's only $35. It's only available in the US, I have to tell you, because of shipping costs. But instead of going to Amazon and buying the book, you can buy it from me directly. I'll autograph it and I'll ship it to you in the US and sign you up for the free class. So I hope some of you will take advantage of that. We have posted all of the 2024 upcoming workshops that we'll be doing here on Bright Talk. And we have 60 plus over at People First Leadership Academy. Many of those are free. So please, right here on the channel or at People First Potential, come on in and find out what else you need. Take advantage of it. And before you leave today, if you would please give me a review. Let me know how this was or wasn't helpful for you. I just always like to know so we can keep on improving with every single one that we do.